I definitely have a good one for
Hit
you.
me.
Yeah, so I would say assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups.
Hell yeah. Hello, guys. Welcome to another unedited podcast with me, Ed Gould. Today's show is about something a little bit different. It's about programmatic advertising. Now, this is a topic that a lot of you out there think you understand, but in my experience, I'm not sure how many internal teams have really got to grips with programmatic, which is why I have invited our programmatic expert, Remon, on to talk to us today. Now, Remon has been working with us on a bunch of different projects which we're going to dig into, and we're going to show you case study examples of how programmatic advertising can really be used for best effect for brands and for businesses like yours. If you're in the marketing and the advertising side of things, I'm also going to be digging into how creative paired with good programmatic can really move the dial, and listen along all the way till the end to hear Remon's top tips on what good looks like in this space. So it's a deep dive into something technical with a brilliant guy from Brussels via Amsterdam. So this is an interesting one. So if you're ready, I think you're getting the idea by now. Sit back, relax, and it's time for another unedited conversation. Welcome to the Black Box Studio. It's an exciting space, I'm sure you'll agree. But for our listeners, just to kick off, we've been working together for some time now, and we're going to get into lots of different examples of the top subject for today, which is programmatic advertising. But to kick off, why don't you give us a bit of introduction about who you are, where you're from, what you do, just to give us some context.
Sure. So my name is Remon Pepers. I'm from the Netherlands. I've been working in marketing since I was 17 years old, originally starting out as an affiliate marketer, as an intern for a company who soon after hired me. And I really got the hang and the feel for digital advertising right off the bat. It really kind of drew me in. And since then, I've been working for various companies. I have worked for affiliate networks. I've worked on the advertiser side. I have worked for programmatic advertising platforms. I've done price comparison. I've pretty much touched all the surfaces within marketing that you can possibly have. I've done email marketing, search, you name it. And yeah, I'm here now, and I'm very excited really to be invited to your podcast. And yeah, thanks for having me.
So the current business that we're working together on, and you're part of the Carswiggle Collective, that's with my agency hat on rather than my podcast hat on, but it's called Remetrics. Give us a bit of an overview of why you created that and what the aim of that business is.
Sure. So I've basically created Remetrics to help customers with a much more thorough approach to programmatic advertising. I have a lot of experience. I've got a couple of companies before this that were also involved heavily in programmatic advertising. And I've seen and I've learned from having those companies and having moved on from that now as my own kind of standalone unit, giving me strength to head into the direction that I choose to go with the company. And I think also when it comes to the innovations, having full control over that is really one of the reasons why I wanted to set this up for myself as well.
And obviously we've been working together for, it's multiple years now. I mean,
it's almost a decade.
Almost a decade.
More, yeah.
I thought I was still 20, but
Since,
there you go.
2013, probably.
2013.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that we love working with you is that subject matter expertise into programmatic, that deep level of understanding, a subject where we were using it and we understand it, but actually, unless you're really doing it every second of every day, it's really hard to get that depth. And that's what this unedited conversation is really going to focus on, because I think a lot of our wonderful listeners out there probably touch on programmatic. They might have been sold some programmatic. They might be trying a platform that someone's promised them will answer all of their problems and opportunities.
Yeah.
It might be that there's a CMO out there that's hired a programmatic expert internally, and they're wondering, is that really an expert? Am I getting the right? All of those wonderful things we hope to sort of explore today on this conversation about programmatic. And the reason that we want to delve into this so much is it's one of those facets and one of those channels from a marketing and advertising point of view, which is growing at a huge rate that people are being asked to look at. But I know from firsthand experience from working with the CMOs and the marketing leaders I'm talking to that there is sometimes a lack of real understanding. So I thought it'd be great to kick off with a simple explanation for those listening that might have heard of programmatic but don't understand it. Why does it exist? What is it?
So why does it exist? I think is the important question is traditional marketing would always involve a lot of going back and forths. You had to pick up the phone, you'd had to send out a couple of emails to get your advertising space booked in with the various publishers, with the various suppliers. You kind of want to steer away from all that manual labor. You want to make that a lot more automated, a lot more kind of like user-friendly, as so to say. And I think what it boils down to is that you have advertisers who are willing to buy advertising space on one end, and on the other hand, you have the publishers who are willing to sell their advertising space. And basically what programmatic advertising does is cut out all the need, all the noise, kind of like for emailing, for calling, and connect that through a simple system in the middle where they bring the demand side together with the supply side and allow kind of like the exchange of purchasing and selling inventory. I think that's in a nutshell what programmatic advertising is all about. It's really about making things easy, and then on top of being able to target or being able to reach out to these various publishers, you can look at additional things like audience targeting, because we have a smartphone in our pocket, we carry it everywhere we go. And it tells us a lot about the user. It tells us about where you are. It tells us about who you are. You might have a couple of running apps that you're using frequently. There's a weather app that you like to use. You like to read the news on Bloomberg. We know that you've purchased certain goods in the last 6 months because you have a credit card expense that relates to that type of a purchase. And all of that kind of like comes together into this one shell in programmatic advertising and allowing us to really buy targeted ads in a fully automated way where you no longer have to deal with all the traditional ways of communicating and buying that inventory. So.
And I think the thing that I've noticed from the thing I've noticed from working with you and the projects that we've been doing, the other shift is a focus away from the channel or the media outlet onto the person.
Exactly.
So what programmatic enables a marketeer to do is get back to the idea of individuals. And I don't even mean personas. So a great way of working if you're buying media is having a set of personas, going after those personas, and you'll find information about channels and publications that meet those persona requirements. That's traditional digital advertising.
Exactly. Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that one customer view that programmatic can really get you if you're working it well.
Yeah. So you mentioned it correctly about having traditional marketing where you just put an ad up on a website and it touches everybody who visits that website. What programmatic allows you to do is to not just send that to the entire website, but to send that traffic or that advertisement directly to a person, tailored to a specific user based on who they are, based on what they have done. And you can imagine, for example, this is a situation where we bring in household information. You go home at night, you use your smartphone, you connect to the Wi-Fi, and the same moment you have your smart television on, we can see that this smart television is now connected to the same Wi-Fi address. So we can tell that possibly this may be you actually watching the sports at 7 p.m. in the evening. And then that allows us to really just get a full understanding of you as a persona, the persona that we were just talking about. So it allows you to really focus on this person or this persona as a user rather than on a device level or on a publisher level as a whole.
So I come to you and I'm a brand and I say, Remon, I know who I'm trying to target. I've got a clear view of that. Why should if I take my advertising budget and say I've got £1 million, why should I dedicate the majority of that to programmatic over traditional digital or anything else? And what might the outcome benefit wise be of doing that?
I think the most important part about programmatic advertising is that everything becomes measurable. So whenever we serve an ad, we can capture a user ID, and there's of course a lot of talk about cookies being kind of like phased out. And
Let's get onto that later in a
yeah,
bit
we'll
with
do
the
that. But
trends.
so it comes down to being able to track every step of the customer journey. Because you have a phone in your pocket, it tells us about your location. We
Like
can
your one just did then.
exactly, and then and then if you visit a specific location, we can see whether you've been at an event. We can see whether you've gone to a store. These are moments that we can capture in that customer journey. That allows us to then incorporate that into the overall strategy of maybe doing a retargeting campaign, targeting people who came to your store, thanking them for their visit, following them up. That's something that you're not able to do with traditional forms of marketing. So this programmatic, making the full customer journey visible and measurable, and then actionable as well. So you can serve tailored creatives based on which stage of the funnel a person is. Somebody who's already been on the website, somebody who's already kind of like a loyal customer, they've already come to your store. Why not serve them with kind of like a loyalty tailored creative versus somebody who has never been in touch with your brand before? There's these ways that we can do that with programmatic advertising to really tailor and customize a creative dynamically based on the recipient of that ad. And that's, I think, the most prominent difference between traditional and programmatic advertising.
So we have this idea that as a marketing leader, I can target individuals and I can target them across the plethora of different tools, channels, apps, products, publications that they're using.
Yeah.
How let's just dig into just how wide that could go. So we're talking about everything from employing social boosting through to podcasts. Like, how wide is that sort of channel gamut that you're actually employing when you're designing a programmatic campaign?
I think the ecosystem is so fast that it really encompasses pretty much all the possible inventory in the world, ranging from your out of home, which is now digital that you can purchase programmatically, to everything on a smart device. Anything that's connected with the internet allows you to build your programmatic campaign and kind of create this customer journey within those different platforms. And any publisher, any news site, any app, any website, whatever there's available, they want to make money. They want to have advertisers buy inventory from their platform. So it really creates an opportunity to get your ads out there, and it gets you the opportunity to do that through video, through audio. There's the way that we can, for example, convert a social post that you're normally posting on LinkedIn or Twitter. We can convert that into a digital ad that resembles exactly what you're doing inside the social platform. But now this is no longer siloed off, because everything you do in social platforms only draws attention from the people on that platform. You have only the followers who follow you see that ad most of the time. So why not extend that and reach users outside of the original platform? Get them on a Bloomberg, on a Forbes, whatever your target audience is and where they reside. We can focus on pushing that ad outside of there. And that gives you the ability to get that social proof for your brand. It helps you establish that trust, and it allows you to build out that follower count that you normally would struggle to increase if you're only staying within that platform.
Maybe if we take a working example. I mean, me and you are working on something at the moment, and we won't go into the detail of the client, but it's a major global manufacturer that is trying to, or manufacturing intelligence company, actually, I should say, that's trying to better engage with machine shops around the world.
Yeah.
We're working on a program at the moment. Maybe if we take this as an example to set out that journey of people, maybe that would help people who are listening to this. So if I am someone that's in charge of a machine shop that's making parts and I'm based in Germany, what's going to be happening over the next couple of weeks or months that we've got going? And let's roll that out as an example.
So first of all, what we want to be able to do is to target those machine shop owners, right? So we're going to include a couple of elements in that approach that makes it possible to reach those machine shops. First of all, we're going to use location targeting. What we're going to do is we're going to draw geofences on these different machine shops that are spread across Germany. All we need is a address information and a company name so that we can report back on that. What we're then going to be doing is serving ads on that location, but we want to do that to the right people. We don't want to do that to any member of staff. We just want to make sure that the decision makers or the business owners, the people who are involved in, or the target audience that we want to draw in for this campaign. So what we're doing is we're getting that information, sending out ads, make sure that we capture the right audience. Now, there's a couple of events that we're going to be targeting as well. It's a bit of a similar setup there. What we're looking for is get the event location, scout out in the event location vicinity if there's any interesting high footfall areas that we might do some digital out-of-home stuff. Train stations, airports
coming into
or the main road towards the event. Exactly. And we're going to do geofencing around those areas. We're going to buy the digital out-of-home. We can make sure that we only buy the digital out-of-home in the times that people are actually coming to and from the event, which is something you couldn't do with original print.
To cut down wastage and overspend on stuff you don't use.
Yeah, so you cut out a lot of that waste indeed. And people at the event are going to be served ads in real time, but in the same time, we're also capturing users at the event so that at a later stage, if the client decides we want to do some retargeting or we want to kind of learn who these people were at the event, then we can use that information and we can start sending them ads to follow up after the event's over, telling them, hey, thanks for your visit. Maybe it's nice to bring a visit to our landing page or to book a demo or to schedule a call with us at a later stage. And once we have a better picture of the overall campaign and understand these are important audiences for us, this is the kind of profile that really works well with our brand. We need to have decision makers within this and this industry from this and this background. Let's target them and build a lookalike profile for that. So we can expand what we've already learned and we can expand that into like what we call lookalike modeling and target people that have similar profiles.
So in essence, with this example, we're saying one of the targets can experience multiple touch points where they're going to the event in Germany, but they've already been exposed to messaging about the event or the products or services. As they approach that, they're seeing out-of-home stuff in the train stations. They might be looking on their social channels and they're seeing boosted posts that are part of that. And all of these things, obviously, we can book individually. I can book some out of home. I can book, but the secret sauce, the magic, is that these are all being controlled from one platform and one strategy that ties all of that together.
Exactly.
And gives you a number of different data points that allow us to think and understand that specific user in their unique way.
Exactly. And we can exactly see in that multi-touch point journey, what are the best combinations of marketing? How do we best and wisest spend our budget to get the maximum return on investment for everything that we do? So that's, I think, again, leading back to the first question, the core of programmatic advertising is that full trackability, that single customer view, and kind of following up in the right sequence to get the highest impact.
We will draw on a couple of other examples as we go through, but I think one of the things to point out at this juncture is you need, as an individual that's looking at this as a tactic, you need a certain level of commitment to this to be able to derive the right amount of activity and data to make it work. So this isn't just a quick thing that you might try. There's an element of commitment to it. But from a practical point of view, you can get going quite easily if you're working with the right advisors. They can run these things as a test and prove fairly quickly the effectiveness of this over your traditional routes, can't they?
Yeah, and I think that's also where Remetrics comes in with its expertise over the last decade or more, actually. In programmatic advertising, we have the benchmarks, we have the numbers, we know what works best in which types of situations. So because of the availability of all this data that we now have to hand, it will also become very easy for us to kind of give a forecast of or predictions of what is going to happen when you spend certain budgets in a certain way, especially if you combine the different channels and the different methodologies into one campaign.
And the reason we love this with my agency hat on at Carswell Gould, we have the Carswell Gould Collective, and Remon is a key part of that, and the way that we're we're working within that and with our client partners is we're trying to find new ways of charging based on outcome.
Exactly.
You know, the future of agency, from our point of view, is if we stick to an hourly rate, we're going to be dead. So, and we're already evolving a lot of those. But the beauty of something like this is, due to the work that we're doing together, we're able to look at and offer the customer a very structured and clear view of what they will get.
Yeah.
So we can pretty much guarantee certain aspects of this from the get-go, based on trends, based on running numbers. So that's really great, because one of the key things about this topic which comes up as a challenge is the idea of transparency. And I think what we could look at next is some of the good and the bad and the ugly of programmatic. And there's a lot of different people out there practicing or professing to practice programmatic. There's also a lot of challenges from regulation, GDPR. You've got big channel owners that are either putting their inventory available or taking it back off. So let's spend a little moment about thinking, what are the key things within programmatic that are affecting how it's scaling at the moment? How do you see that at the moment?
Well, I think touching base on the GDPR stuff I think it's a very hot topic still, even till today. It started in 2018 when things came into effect. And what it basically entails is that the privacy of people is now much more controlled and much more regulated than it was before, which means that to get access to certain points of data has become a little bit more tricky. And then you have the shift away from cookie-based advertising. There's a lot of these factors that continuously evolve in the programmatic landscape, and it's up to the experts and up to the people controlling the platforms to kind of find ways to how do we incorporate this new legislation, how do we circumvent this. And it's kind of a cat and mouse game also for the publishers, because they want to make revenue from advertising. So whenever there's a new regulation, they'll find ways to get users to comply with certain new rules. They'll have to apply or tick the box, accept these new terms and conditions before you're able to use an app. And that's, of course, for the end user, not always a big problem. It's just a matter of ticking that box. But in the background, they might not always know what that really entails. And every time there's a new law or there's a new legislation, there will be ways for the industry to kind of
and it was always thus. I mean, I'm slightly greyer than you, or you're not grey at all, but those that aren't watching and are just listening, imagine a grey beard, and you're probably in the right place for how I look at the moment. But for years, we've seen regulation impact different areas of marketing, and so it should. There's privacy is a key thing that, if anything, is becoming an even hotter topic. If you think about Gen Z and beyond, they are even more aware of some of these factors. I think the other thing that's interesting in what you talked about is channels. So someone like Google that said they're going to get rid of cookies, and then they're not going to get rid of cookies, and then they can't work out. My understanding from the backstory on that is they are committed to reducing that, taking that out of the equation. And that means that the programmatic industry would have to find another way of effectively doing that. And people have tried things, but they've not been particularly successful. Do you see an alternative that you're aware of? Are you guys trialing different things in that space?
Well, I think the most prominent thing that is already happening is the use of user ID information. So no longer leaving a cookie on somebody's device, no longer dropping a file on somebody's phone or on somebody's computer, but to kind of capture a fingerprint of the user, which could be a raw advertising ID, or it could be the browser that you're using in combination with an aspect of a lot of other aspects, basically. And that is another way to identify a user. And sometimes
because at the heart of this is, how do we identify the individual user to effectively,
to make sure we target effectively
in a fair way and in a compliant way. And there's lots of different things people are looking at, I guess, including this.
So and the most impacted area would be the people who have websites, the publishers with websites, because they are predominantly cookie based. But again, they're also finding ways to trace which browser types, which IP addresses are using their website, and that's kind of like a new way to track. It's not really a new way; it's been used already for a very long time, but this is now kind of the way that we're trying to make sure that we can still tell a little bit about who is visiting us, so that we can come up with more relevant offers. And
there's always this tension, isn't there, between trying to gather as much information as possible. Information is power.
Yeah.
Versus getting on with stuff and getting stuff done. I think programmatic straddles that quite nicely, because just by doing stuff, you are collecting that data and information that reinforms the next move.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think that in a world where a marketing leader is having to do everything, they have to be a tech expert, they have to be good at talking to the board, good at talking to the team. There's a lot on. Having something that simplifies that is a great facet. And maybe this regulatory change and these things will always keep going, but that benefit will outweigh the work. And I guess from a brand point of view, they're not having to overcome these obstacles. It's you guys on the front line that are having to work those things out. Is that correct, or does it impact the brand?
I think the most impacted players in this would be the publishers itself, right? They have to adjust constantly. They have to adhere to the new regulations. You have to put a new cookie policy on your website. You have to now ask apps, for following you or not. So it's mostly on the publisher side, and then on our side, where we kind of bring together the supply and the demand. That's where, of course,
and
there are
efficiency between the two, and present it in an easier way.
There's frameworks in place, and then there's the obligation for the networks or the ad exchanges where these publishers connect to do their due diligence on the publisher. Are they adhering to these rules? Are people correctly opted in? And then it's our end. On our end, it's really all about making sure that if a user wants to opt out, if they don't want to be tracked anymore, that we offer them that solution from the advertising side of things. So they don't even have to do that on the publisher side, but we can do that also on the advertising side of things. So making sure you, as a person, have your privacy respected at all times. And if you don't like to see this ad anymore, there's a little button there that allows you to kind of opt out from that. And then on our side, we're going to block you from getting those adverts ever again. That's kind of a system that we have in place from our end to make sure that that is also possible.
Let's talk about brand transparency and the trust that a brand can have, because I think we've touched on this a little. My brand appearing on channels I haven't picked, my potential customers getting fed up. These are issues that might be on the mind of somebody who is planning to use this. What steps can a brand take, or when using programmatic, to reduce the chances of their brand being negatively affected? Are people able to say, I don't want to be on these sorts of things, I want to be on these? How configurable is this?
It is configurable to a very granular level. In every situation, you as a brand are able to decide which publishers you want to be on and you don't want to be presented on. You have to bear in mind that if you're going to narrow it down too much, you might not get the reach that you were initially looking for. But things like contextualization, making sure that your brand is brand safe. So there's brand safety partners that you can integrate with, like IAS or Moat or Double Verify. There's a couple of these agencies that help you with brand safety. But then there's also the contextualization. So if you want to be visible only in specific types of context, that's where third-party crawlers or first-party crawlers come into play, and they will detect this is the type of content that's suitable for my brand. I only want to be visible there. To make sure you don't bore people to death with bombardments of ads, there is the way to frequency cap. So you're putting a limit on how many impressions you're going to serve to a specific user. And if they've already seen an ad once in the last 5 minutes, you're not going to serve them another ad because it will become annoying. So those are the things that not all brands know about, not all agencies know about, but it's very important to kind of create that long-lasting brand value.
And to think in that granularity. It's not about making it harder. It's about the reason I love it, and I'm really excited about the work that we're doing on this, is it allows the creative, and I'm a creative director, as you know, so I come at it from a slightly different point. It allows me to start thinking about the granularity, not of that journey for that person. And if it's done right, and if we really dig into this and get that wonderful project that works well, you're able to communicate appropriately,
Exactly.
and that diminishes or reduces the chance of someone going, oh, I'm so bored of this. This brand is killing me. When I compare that, and again, I'm not going to name any names, but they still exist in this world and I still work with them, so I definitely won't know. But there's still organizations out there that are relying pretty heavily on a format of, we'll write some emails, we'll do a webinar, and we'll have a white paper.
Mm-hmm.
And they're wondering why it's not, they're going, why is this not working? Now, it's not that that's wrong in itself. If you've got something brilliant to say, if there's a great webinar, if there's a great piece, but thinking that that's the strategy, that's
it
reductive.
could be part of the overall strategy. It should never be the core focus, in my opinion.
So how could you help a company that takes that truth? Because there's millions of these companies that take that sort of approach of email, social, core assets, a white paper, split it down into a bunch of, and the marketing leaders or the marketing guys that are listening to this will have done this a million times. How do you supplement or increase their chances of success?
So I think with programmatic, it's all about amplifying what they are already doing. What is the brand currently doing, and how can we make sure that that is amplified? How is that going to be spread across more people who are interested, with a genuine interest in what you're actually doing, making sure that we target the right audiences on the right locations at the right time, using the right channels, following up sequentially, not boring everybody with the same ad over and over again, but let's try to differentiate a little bit on sending them an audio ad, letting them listen to a podcast, and then pump in the ad that we have in mind, follow up with a video, follow up with some display, and kind of create that more multi-touch point view and amplifying what they want to really push forward.
One of the things that I think I was keen to do as well is just maybe bring out one of the examples that we've worked on again together recently, which was the New Zealand campaign, which I think would be great if you could start by giving us a bit of an overview of what the challenge was on that project. And this was a Carswell Gould Remetrics project for the New Zealand government. And what was great about this is it brought the best of all the worlds together. A great client, good creative, good marketing, and then tying in that programmatic, and it got great results. But give us a bit of an overview of what that challenge was, what it had to do, and kind of the results that you got out of that, because I know that that's just coming to an end now, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. So the main challenge really was for New Zealand's technology industry sector in New Zealand to get more eyes on it, and particularly from the UK market. So it was a campaign that really wanted to drive visibility to people working in the tech sectors, from health to finance and to also the general tech. So any organization that has any technology requirement for their business to operate, any innovations or any developments of technology, that was kind of like the target audience. And to do or to reach out to these different audiences, we were tasked with ways to kind of, or to find ways to do so. And we decided it would be a good idea, again, to really tap into that programmatic capability of being able to target the audiences. We would be able to pinpoint, let's say, the top 500, the FTSE 500 companies that all have technological requirements, potentially investors who want to invest in the New Zealand tech industry as well. And we would then, again, make sure that we add that audience layer on top of that. So we're targeting the right offices, but we're also making sure that we're targeting these decision makers. Now, what types of ads we would use would be a very wide range, again, from your video ads, from working together with social influencers, key opinion leaders, integrating their social posts into social displays. So again, broadening that horizon, making sure that we get the best possible breadth for New Zealand Trade and Enterprise to get visible. There were articles written and publications, press releases, and all of that kind of like intertwined into one global approach within the UK for targeting the right audiences and getting that message across. And as a result, we've been able to really drive very high visibility metrics. We've been able to drive a lot of traffic to the various landing pages that were set up. We also targeted some of the important events throughout the year that took place. So from health tech to accountant tech to fintech, anything related to the topic. We were able to capture those users at the events and again, retarget them, create lookalike models, really kind of an all-encompassing approach for New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. And I think the core outcome was that they've been much better perceived by the audience. They've got a lot more traffic to their website. They've got a lot more engagement, a lot more interaction with some of the organizations that they had originally set their targets or their minds out to reach. And yeah, I think overall we did a really good job at that.
Definitely. And I think for the listeners that are out there, if you look for an episode that's either out or coming up with Jason Bradbury, who is one of the influencers, who is a creative, he worked on this project as well. And the reason I mention this is, again, this example of marketing leaders bringing together great influencers, great creative, but really intelligent placement that is focused on the individual user. And for New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, it allowed them to really frame why I should consider investing in New Zealand, taking my business there and getting involved there. And the stats are off the charts, and it was a great project, but it was also a great example of how the secret sauce of this is really that combined approach between the proposition, the creative, the programmatic, and everything in between. So it's a great example of that. If we move to where we see the future of programmatic going, if you think about what your hopes are personally, and dear listener, who's Remon has just had a child and just got married, so he looks quite tired in front of me at the moment. So let's contextualize away from the fact that you're just getting into that life and all that brings. But when you think about that vision for the future, for your business and your practice, what do you think is going to happen in programmatic? How do you see it evolving?
Yeah, I think we're steering more and more away from anything traditional. You can see the decline of linear TV. You can see the decline of printed out of home. You can see everything become more digital. I think the big gain is going to be around the augmented reality and the virtual reality, which is currently really being hyped up by the big players like a Meta and the Nvidias of the world. And I think that's also where programmatic is going to be going to. There's probably going to be a lot of people who will just be flicking on their headset and enjoying a whole day in a virtual reality, where I think that advertising, which is very easily connected to programmatic advertising, is going to take place.
And we're already in game.
Exactly.
We're already buying space in game.
Yeah.
It's an app. So anything that is digital and accessible, you'd expect those publishers to try and derive greater value by putting it to you as an available asset to sell. Is that the sort of crux of the...
Exactly, and I think that's going to happen inside metaverses. It's going to happen outside when you're outdoor in a specific place where you can just create a new augmented reality. There's a lot of this already happening. And I think also that's where more budget is going to shift towards. We also see a very high or big shift in connected TV, like I mentioned. So every smart TV comes with a pre-installed set of apps. It allows you to really, to start targeting users on TV based on their audience criteria, because we now have all this household information, because we can see that you're the same person logging into your Wi-Fi address. And I think that's also one of the things that keeps developing over the next years. So everything smart device, think about even in-car advertising, because we will have automated driving. You'll probably have like a heads-up display in which you can watch a movie. So think about those kinds of things. Your smartwatch, maybe at some point we'll have a hologram thing. But I think that the most obvious one right now is really augmented and virtual reality.
And I think what's exciting from a brand's point of view, and certainly some of the people I work with and we're talking to at the moment, is how do they start approaching deploying their brand in such an array of different places, and how do they make sure that they're not taking a approach for all of those things, because as we've talked about earlier,
Yeah.
there's a very different experience I want to get from driving my car to wearing a headset to listening to a podcast. So I think there's a lot of pressure on creatives like me
Yeah.
and you.
I think that's where most of the difference is made anyway, in the creative messaging.
Sure. Well, obviously, I'm going to say for sure. It's the most important thing in the world.
And then bringing that to the right people, which is what we do. So I think having...
It's a perfect partnership.
Exactly. Having the mix of tailored messaging, really being as relevant as possible in a non-intrusive way, I think that's the way forward.
And that's the challenge, really, I think, because it's getting the brands to understand that, yes, you can dip a toe, but if you really want to derive the best value for this, we're in a world now that, of course, you can go and get very cheap creative done all over the place, but you know, the top line thinking, how are we going to start thinking differently about how this creative deploys based on a journey, much more based on a journey. So you're almost thinking about UX, or you know, you're almost thinking about it like a website, but for that human aspect. And I think that that's something that we've been playing with for a while together now, and we're getting there on. But it's something that I know a lot of people aren't touching yet. They might be running one set of ad creative and saying, "Can you turn this into as much as possible?" I understand that, and but what we have to do as an industry is gain their faith, show them the way, and then say, look, if you pull some budget away from some of those traditional activities, even if you give us 10% of that budget in the first instance, and let us deploy that across a programmatic campaign that's truly looking at different creative touch points all the way through the life cycle. I talk about cradle to grave.
Exactly.
You know, I'm also, So if you allow us to do that, I've already seen that we can prove it works every time. So it's and this isn't an advert for just us, even though obviously I want all of our listeners to get in contact with Cars with Gould and the team. But it's more about how we change our thinking as an industry and say, how can we put less crap in the world and focus down on what really matters to be said to someone at what point in their journey to positively influence them towards our outcome.
Exactly.
And I think that that's a big piece. One of the other things I did want to touch on was sustainability. And it might make you go, ooh, I don't know if I want to talk about this or not. So I heard this stat, and obviously if you're in a large corporate, there's big sustainability targets and challenges. But as an industry, I heard this incredible stat about the amount of CO2 that programmatic specifically creates.
Really, yeah?
Yeah, really. I shall finally. Yeah, you might be
Please
uncomfortable
do share that
for this
article
one.
with me. Yeah.
And it was actually on a WARC podcast. And the reasoning about this is that the perception is, and we've just been talking about creating lots of different types of placements. The perception is there's still a lot of wastage within what you serve.
Yeah.
And that wastage, one added up, is a big chunk of computing power, screen power, display power as well.
Yeah.
And it's running through multiple different channels and multiple. Yeah, you're a bit uncomfortable.
No, but that's where you make the
check.
difference as an agency or as a provider of programmatic services, because that's where you hone in on being as relevant as possible, as precise as possible, so that you cut out all of that waste. We can probably achieve the same results at 50% of the budget that some other agency is doing it, because they simply don't go that deep.
But that's
in terms
that
of
efficiency piece. So
Exactly,
when I was listening to these stats, which were fascinating, and I'm not going to try and say the actual numbers because I'll get them wrong, but it was tons and tons of CO2.
Yeah.
When you think about that, and I compare that to other aspects of marketing and advertising, sure, everything has a cost. It's how responsible we can be within our use. And that means thinking really clearly about, again, all of those touch points and how few times do I need to connect with someone to get them over the line.
Exactly.
Rather than just hitting them with a million different things every second of the day.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we're getting towards the sort of end of our conversation. And I wondered, in your long and illustrious career in marketing, one of the things I do like to ask people about is if there's ever been a really good piece of advice that you've been given by someone that you think is maybe relevant to the conversation that we're having.
Yeah.
It might be an old mentor or someone that said something.
I definitely have a good one for
me.
you. Yeah. So I would say assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. It's the
Hell
first
yeah.
the first thing I've learned when I was 17 years old working for this agency. And you can only do marketing if you actually know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, if you're not tracking anything, all you can do is assume. And when you start making assumptions, that's when you fuck up. So I think that's the most important lesson. Make
And
sure
you're
that...
saying that to a creative that is basically 90% feel.
Yeah, well,
but you're right.
We have to be on the metrics, and I think for any programmatic campaign to be successful, you need to track as many data points as possible to get the most out of every campaign, to understand how you can cut that waste so your sustainability goals will be achieved, to also maximize the ROI bottom line. I think that's the best lesson I can give.
I think that's great advice. Yeah. I think it's great advice. So to wrap up, what's next for you? What are you focusing on, and where are you going next?
I think Remetrics going next is, well, we've only recently kind of launched the brand, but we're really going into, like I mentioned before, that more virtual and augmented reality space, seeing what's going on in the different metaverses that are currently being developed. I think that's really one of the future things that we need to get ready for.
And be ahead of everyone else.
Exactly. I'd like to be an early adapter, making sure that we can start educating people on how it's best to enter that market. And of course, it's good for our clientele to be with us that way.
I think that's a great thing to do. It's also a great way to avoid those late nights with the baby. Just put the goggles on and chill out and shut everything
exactly.
down. Listen, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I think it's been really insightful, and I really
Likewise.
hope our listeners will be able to get a better grasp of how they could start using programmatic, or how they can kick their programmatic team to sort of think a little bit differently about what they're doing. But thank you for joining us today, Remon.
My pleasure. And likewise, thank you very much.
That's a wrap on another episode of UnEDited. Make sure to like, subscribe and turn on those notifications so you never miss an episode. Find all of our updates on your favourite social media and podcast platforms. Just search for the UnEDited podcast.